Puzzle films transform the way we see the world. They twist the laws of nature, bend time, and teach us our perspectives aren't as reliable as we think. But not all puzzle films are created equally. And although Inception may be a masterfully crafted thrill ride, it doesn't nearly achieve the same puzzle film heights as Christopher Nolan's earlier film, Memento. In this video, I want to share film history's lessons behind what makes a masterful puzzle film. But I'm also going to prove that, contrary to popular opinion, Inception fails to succeed in this format for 3 key reasons. What makes a puzzle film? Dr. Warren Buckland, film studies professor at Oxford Brookes University, describes puzzle films as operating outside the conventions of classical movies. The average Hollywood movie wants to create an overall familiar experience.
You may be Captain America, but you're not Steve Rogers.
But the puzzle film wants to create a completely unfamiliar experience where the audience has to work to understand the film's strange world. They limit the audience's perspective on the story through an unreliable narrator who frames the story with their own limited perspective on the world around them. This could be as simple as a detective who's missing key details in solving the big crime. Could be a character who's just lying as they retell their life. Or puzzle films can go further by presenting impossibly abstract perspectives on the world around us. This includes characters who perceive the world through a fragmented experience of time, a character with memory loss or psychosis.
My name is Edward Daniels!
Or just about anything a director can dream up that could totally shift how we understand a film's story. But with all these convoluted premises, puzzle films beg a simple question. Why watch a movie that purposefully rearranges its story to deceive you, and then asks you to work to piece the story back together? Why not just tell the same story linearly? I'd argue that not only can it be fun to try and piece together these films' complex stories, but puzzle films offer audiences the unique opportunity to see the world through an entirely new lens. So how do puzzle films create their effect? Puzzle films create unique perspectives by subverting how movies usually structure their stories. Let's quickly clarify 2 commonly misused terms in storytelling. If story is the fictional events that the movie is retelling, then plot is how a film chops up this story by omitting details or jumping across time. A conventional film tends to show story completely linearly and chooses to omit details that are unnecessary, but audiences can assume must have happened between scenes. Anything included clearly relates to the scene before it, clearly leads to the next, and audiences can trust that anything in between isn't needed to understand the story. So, the puzzle film preys on this blind faith by cleverly rearranging the story in ways that audiences aren't expecting, by revisiting the same event from different perspectives. By flashing through time without context.
Like the day they arrived.
Or by even presenting the film in reverse chronological order. Oftentimes, these choices help show audiences how the film's main character sees the story and the world around them. Through all these methods, the puzzle film unveils that there are 2 ways to view the same moment, which challenges audiences to reframe their own first impression right alongside the film's protagonist. So when Arrival uses typical flashback structure towards the beginning of the film to show us its main character struggling to cope with her dying daughter, audiences readily assume this story event must be from her past. But as the film progresses, we learn that she can actually see time non-linearly, and what we thought was the past are really future memories yet to be made. So the audience has to reframe the character's previous actions not as grieving the death of her daughter or being overcome with traumatic memories, but instead as a piece of a larger puzzle. This kind of puzzle film reveal confronts audiences with their own prejudice in how they prefer to see the world. Memento achieves universally acclaimed puzzle film heights, and we'll discuss in more detail why scholars hail this film, but for now I wanted to focus just on its beginning. Audiences first see the result of Leonard's whole story with 0 context, and suddenly the audience is challenged to think about the story completely differently. If we were shown Memento's story in proper order, opening with Leonard's need for revenge all the way until he murders Teddy, the audience would be asking questions along the lines of generally, What's going to happen? Will Leonard avenge his wife? How will Leonard find her killer? Instead, by starting with the end, the result of the film's whole story, the audience asks completely different kinds of questions. How did Leonard catch Teddy? Did he kill the right person? And more generally, how did Leonard get here? Questions geared towards actively piecing things together rather than passively watching them unfold in a traditional Hollywood film. And it's within this active engagement that the audience begins to challenge their own prejudice and how they want to view the story world, how they prefer to. For Arrival, these non-linear flash forwards cause the audience to question why the director chose to include them. Is this what it would be like to experience non-linear time like Dr. Banks? Can Dr. Banks interact between timelines? What is this like?
I can read it.
You begin to feel like you could really see how Dr. Banks perceives time with all of its disorienting interruptions and elusive meanings. For Memento, the reverse chronological structure requires the audience to think about how each event relates to each other. When each scene begins, you have to figure out right alongside Leonard,
oh, where am I? Somebody's bedroom. Oh, must be her room. But who's she?
This is the crucial aspect of how puzzle films engage its audiences. The way it gets audiences to ask a different kind of question and to seek answers as the story unfolds. Therefore, the puzzle film experience is all about deceit, about misrepresenting the story and later correcting it to force the audience to reframe how they think about story. This is where I'll intervene and say that puzzle films tend to have mixed responses. The Hollywood system craves clarity in all its stories to ensure audiences keep interest and never risk getting lost or leaving the theater. After all, Hollywood must promise audiences a familiar and fun experience to drive sales, and if that promise is broken too many times, they risk losing their whole bottom line. So to take such a risk on a format that's structured to deceive its audience and to present a purposefully confusing world, there must be an upside. Well, for one, audience members can just have fun trying to uncover the world's mysteries through its incomplete information. A literal puzzle that the audience can enjoy piecing together. But I believe that puzzle films have this incredibly unique potential to not just teach audiences a new way of viewing the world, but to intimately engage them with the protagonist in trying to overcome this foreign perspective. Puzzle films can present a character's incomplete perspective, and oftentimes it's this limited view that causes roadblocks in getting what these characters want.
The man stole my life. I'm gonna steal his trick.
Why, how does he do it? He uses a double.
No. It's too simple. This is a complex illusion.
This can be something as simple as a detective whose incomplete perspective is just a lack of information, or a character who struggles with some psychological condition that rearranges how they see reality.
Thank you, Marcia.
Or a character capable of seeing a world that breaks the metaphysical foundation of the world we know. Puzzle films capitalize on the film medium's ability to play with time and space, and its ability to illustrate, to literally show the audiences what it looks like to perceive within a new world. The puzzle film cleverly reorders how it shows story events to hide things from the audience, the same way the main character's own limited perspective hides certain truths from them. This then prompts the audience to play the game in how to understand the story's world, right alongside the main character, who also aims to overcome their limited perspective. This is where the magic happens. When a character's incomplete perspective becomes the same as the audience's, it forces people to adopt a whole new world view. But more interestingly, the puzzle film can position the audience to work to overcome the character's confusing condition with the exact same tools as the character himself. I find this potential to be captivating, and this is where Christopher Nolan's Memento can teach us just how the puzzle film can give audiences a uniquely and intimately character-driven film-going experience. Rarely is there a movie that audiences, critics, and film philosophers can all agree on. Yet Memento achieves this feat by aligning the character and the audience perfectly through masterfully conceived editing. Memento tells the story of a character, Leonard, with interrograde amnesia, meaning he can't form new memories.
You don't even know my name.
Teddy.
That's because you read it off a fucking picture. You don't know who you are.
Leonard aims to not only avenge his wife's killer, but more importantly, to prove that he can still function in spite of his debilitating condition.
I'm Leonard Shelby. I'm from San Francisco.
That's who you were. That's not what you become.
The audience not only becomes invested in the desire for justice,
I don't even know how long she's been gone.
but they also become invested in Leonard's determination to overcome his condition and to find truth in this impossible situation. Nolan takes this already resonant emotional core and applies the puzzle film format to heighten its dramatic effect. Christopher Nolan makes the expert choice of arranging the story mostly in reverse chronological order. Just as Leonard doesn't know how he got where he is,
Oh, I'm chasing this guy.
or the intentions of the people around him,
No, he's chasing me.
the audience too have no idea.
On the house.
Thanks.
Until it's revealed to us in the next scene, which shows the events leading up to this story event's beginning.
No thanks.
So while the audience may be confused why something is happening, so too is Leonard. And as he pieces together the world around him, the audience also pieces together the film's world to try and figure out who is manipulating him. Not only does the audience take on this unusual perspective thanks to the film's editing, but they're even asking the same questions as Leonard. They're overcoming his condition right alongside him by trying to piece together the film's world. I find it absolutely stunning how Memento positions the audience and Leonard to work side by side to find truth through the same obstacle that is this incomplete, amnesia-ridden perspective. While this audience character perspective alignment is already impressive enough, Nolan then frames this kind of engagement at the core of this story to heighten its emotionality. The emotional core of this story is about perseverance, to piece together truths about his wife's killing from years ago, when he already struggles to remember what he did that morning. Because Nolan has masterfully aligned the audience's perspective with Leonard's, and that limited perspective is itself the largest obstacle in achieving the story's purpose, the audience, in turn, engages directly with what it takes to persevere and to find truth, just like Leonard. They engage directly with the emotional core of the film. When Leonard perseveres and finally discovers some truth hidden by his condition, the audience too feels that catharsis, because they also had to persevere through the film's representation of Leonard's condition to understand the same truth. Because they are positioned to fight the same fight as Leonard himself, the audience experiences a much more intimate journey through the film's emotional twists and turns. Therefore, Memento's editing forces its audience to engage with the film in the same way as its protagonist, in pursuit of his emotional catharsis. Already, this is a masterful act in applying the puzzle film convention, but then Memento's twist ending comes along.
You won't remember.
When it's done, I will know. It'll be different.
Well, I thought so too. In fact, I was sure of it, but you didn't. We found him, you killed him. But you didn't remember. So I helped you. Start looking again. Looking for the guy you already killed. You don't want the truth. You make up your own truth.
Why would I do that?
To create a puzzle you could never solve? Living a dream, kid. A dead wife to pine for. A sense of purpose to your life.
Leonard's perseverance in discovering truth, the emotional core of the film, the journey the audience literally underwent too. That journey may be tainted. It hasn't been a pursuit of truth, but instead a pursuit within a larger lie, a pursuit to give yourself a completely constructed, fictitious purpose, just to have some semblance of meaning in a meaningless life. Not only does this discredit Leonard's hard work to discover truth, but it also discredits the audience's. It all may be in service of a larger lie. One final time, the audience shares the same fate as Leonard. It was never possible to achieve knowledge of truth within the larger lie that is this film. Every time we felt satisfied because we felt an inch closer to the truth was, in fact, meaningless. Just as meaningless as Leonard's own life, and just as meaningless as believing you can find truth outside of your own limited perspective. This heartbreaking lesson about the intangibility of actual truth and meaning comes to affect the audience so intensely because their own work to find truth was meaningless too. If the audience had instead passively watched Leonard's journey, this lesson might still have been resonant, but Because the audience actively engaged through Leonard's perspective, this lesson feels like a lived experience, not just somebody else's story or some fictitious story. That intimate feeling is what makes Memento the critical hit it is. Of course, the film leaves room to deny Teddy, to believe Leonard really did find his wife's killer, and to hold on to even our own ability to find truth. So you can still believe that both your perseverance and Leonard's can overcome limited perspective. But even if you believe that to be true, and this film is a lesson about how you can persevere through anything, that lesson still feels so potent because, once again, this story feels lived. Both readings carry so much weight because they directly involve the spectator's own engagement with the story. They propose meaningful lessons in the pursuit of truth, heightened by the film's ability to align the perspectives and mental activities of its audience and character. And we can see Inception, too, getting so close to using the puzzle film format interestingly, but I'd argue just barely missing out on this heightened impact because of a few critical oversights. Inception definitely engages with the puzzle film format because it wants to push a deceitful game of what's real and what's a dream.
Building a dream from your memory is the easiest way to lose your grasp on what's real and what is a dream.
Is that what happened to you?
Its characters grapple with a theme of what's real.
Her reality. She was possessed by an idea that our world wasn't real.
It uses clever editing to cross-cut between multiple dreams. The film deceives its audience with what it tells them. And more interestingly, it deceives the audience with what it shows them. In these moments, Christopher Nolan uses puzzle film conventions to play with audiences' assumptions. And most tellingly, Nolan uses a cliffhanger ending to beg the audience to ask whether Cobb finished his journey in a dream or reality. Similar to Memento's ending, this ending causes audiences to reread the entire film in line with the game of what's real and what's a dream. So it's clear that Nolan uses the puzzle film format to motivate audiences to question how they should engage with the story. But although this premise is promising, Inception ends up in this awkward place where its story doesn't really commit to this game, yet it still acts as if this question is central to engaging with its story. Certain moments in the story do commit to this theme by aligning audiences with the characters' perspectives, and I'd argue these moments are the most interesting the film has to offer. For instance, the film aligns with Saito, Ariadne, and Cobb as they begin to realize that they might be in a dream.
I've always hated this carpet, sprayed in such distinctive ways, but very definitely made of wool. Right now, I'm lying on polyester, which means I'm not lying on my carpet in my apartment.
Let me ask you a question. You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
Ariadne, how did you get here?
We were talking for like at least an hour.
In a dream, your mind functions more quickly, therefore, time seems to feel more slow.
Why are they all looking at me?
The more you change things, the quicker the projections start to converge on you. Back up. Back up!
Wake me up! Wake me up!
At these moments, the characters expose discrepancies between the dream they're in and the reality they aim to return to. Saito teaches us how differences between the dream's constructed world and the real world can expose that it's actually a dream. Ariadne realizes how dreams often start in the middle, so if a character struggles to remember how they got somewhere, they are likely dreaming. Cobb exposes that the subconscious will fill the dream with people to chase after you and terminate you. However, how are these discrepancies revealed?
Let me ask you a question.
Change things.
You never really
Projections
remember the
start to
beginning
converge
of
on
a dream.
These reveals are performed simply by withholding information until it's later revealed in exposition, rather than giving the audience the tools to realize these things themselves. Compare this to Memento, which trains audiences how to understand the story by revealing its deceitful structure.
On the house.
Thanks.
Though you could argue that really this is okay because these are the first instances of these tricks. So really, this just lays the groundwork for the audience to detect these discrepancies in the future. Inception does perform a more subtle training by playing with film form. Cross-cutting between set pieces serves to tell the audiences that two events occur at the same time, oftentimes revealing that one is reality, while what we assume to be real is actually a dream. Similarly, the film uses slow motion to play with our idea of how time in dream feels much longer. Therefore, slow motion reveals that there's a deeper dream underneath what we're seeing. So Inception creates a toolbox with a bunch of narrative devices and formal tricks that could challenge the viewer in navigating this dream versus reality game. And I get so excited by this premise and this toolbox that Inception is able to build up. But disappointingly, these tools either don't end up being revisited, are just used as a fun narrative moment, or are used in creating layers of dreams in the film's majority runtime, but nothing to do with the top layer of reality. Therefore, it doesn't engage the audience in deciphering what's real. If Inception treated these rules more similarly to how Memento does, then the audience could engage with Cobb to resolve the ambiguity of whether or not they're in a dream. The film's form could challenge the viewer by revisiting familiar locations, but changing some details to expose that it's in fact a dream. Or in the middle of a scene, there's a cut and suddenly there's a subtle difference, exposing to the audience and the character that they're suddenly in a dream. Or a character could realize they never entered a room. Maybe they noticed they didn't track any footprints, and suddenly they realize that they're in a dream. I find the ambiguity and deception in these moments to be so exciting, and I'm sure you had a similar reaction when you first watched Inception.
I'm sorry, partner.
Wait.
You look a bit back here. Very amusing, Mr. Eames.
But Inception fails to meaningfully revisit these moments and therefore struggles to align the character and the audience engagement meaningfully within this proposed game. So while Inception lays an interesting groundwork for the game of what's real, it fails to revisit it meaningfully throughout the story. I believe the biggest reason Inception fails to do so is because it loses sight of ensuring this game is the primary obstacle in Cobb's arc. This whole video essay began because I came across Dr. Andrew Kanya's article. In it, he argues that Inception fails compared to Memento, and I wanted the opportunity to expand upon this idea through the video essay medium. So I'll do my best to summarize his points while still incorporating my own arguments. On the surface, Cobb's journey is simply about reuniting with his kids by incepting Fisher to split up his dead father's corporate empire. But as Cobb continues towards this goal, the biggest obstacle is his subconscious's incarnation of Mal. She sabotages Cobb at multiple turns in order to entice him to give up and join her in limbo. The only reason Mal has such power over Cobb is because Cobb carries this heavy weight of guilt for killing his real wife in the first place. The emotional core of this film becomes about overcoming guilt so that he can finish his mission and reunite with his family. While this is a compelling story, the puzzle film format isn't inherent to navigating this goal. The puzzle premise serves as just a thrilling backdrop, and the question of what's real and what's a dream is tossed to the side. This is most evident in the fact that the final half of the film takes place in a series of nested dreams. As Cobb dives deeper into Fisher's subconscious, he doesn't need to engage with the film's proposed game because he already knows that he's in a dream. It's just a matter of completing the heist by going deeper and deeper. Cobb always knows what layer he's in, and he always knows he's in a dream. It's clear that this potential obstacle that would be this game is discarded. Cobb's biggest obstacle is his projection of Mal interfering. And that obstacle too isn't overcome through the film's presented game, but instead this climactic moment is resolved through dialogue. In Memento, Leonard and the audience constantly play the game to discover what is true in order to attain Leonard's ideas of justice. In Inception, however, neither the audience nor Cobb need to engage with this game to overcome his guilt. All Cobb needs to do is stay within these layers of nested dreams, overcome his guilt by talking to his projection of Mal, then trick Fisher into giving up his corporate empire so Cobb can return home. None of the meat of this story places the audience in a position to ask what's real, because neither the narrative nor the dominant theme of guilt want to ask what's real. A more engaging structure could use Memento as an example and have Cobb depend on discerning what's real and what's a dream to reunite with his family. For example, Cobb faces a threat that has his kids held hostage, but as he tries to collect information on their whereabouts, he must constantly ensure the information he gets is within the real world rather than dream. Once he discerns that he's in a dream, he knows that he can just kill himself to wake up. However, he has to be sure he truly is before taking that chance. This this new Cobb would be supremely invested in discerning reality versus dream, as that's the biggest obstacle in achieving the emotional payoff of reuniting with family. Similarly, the audience would be using the same tools to uncover what's real and what's a dream, regardless of whether Cobb realizes it or not. This model would beautifully marry the audience member and Cobb into both actively engaging within a uniquely deceitful perspective on dreaming and reality, and would heighten the feeling of Cobb's journey by encouraging the audiences to live through his story. How would it feel to live in a reality where you must always question whether you're dreaming? How could you use these tools to discern what's real? Is that kind of skeptical life even worth living? If Inception had reframed its premise to be more focused on this game, these kinds of questions would be begged to be explored and to be truly felt. This is where Inception's most notorious scene really illustrates how misguided this game is. This is the most pointed Inception is in asking the audience to play its game, and countless theorists have debated endlessly, which illustrates how intriguing this final image is. However, regardless of the answer to this question, this twist fails compared to Memento. Because Inception fails to do this legwork behind building up this game throughout the film, the audience hasn't been provided any moments that similarly question what's a dream or what's reality. There aren't any concrete resources in Inception for the audience to validate one reading over another. Memento's twist ending succeeds because it plays off of Leonard's amnesia that the audience has been wrestling with throughout the whole film. But Inception fails to follow suit. Even when we put that issue aside, Inception's alternative readings from its ending don't even propose an equally compelling take on the film's purpose. If we take it to be true that Cobb has ended his journey in a dream instead of in reality, as we might first believe, how does this affect our understanding of the story's emotional core? If he ends in reality, then we can understand Cobb as having overcome his guilt for killing Maul, accepting responsibility, and choosing to finally let go.
We had our time together, and I have to let you go. I have to let you go.
But if he ends in a dream, then we can reread this climactic scene as Maul being correct to coax Cobb into killing himself to wake up and to enter the real reality. Suddenly, this once cathartic moment represents Cobb's last chance to come back to reality, and when he chooses to abandon Maul's projection, he ends the film back where he began, in a dream without knowing it. The film's emotional core, with Cobb's wrestling with his guilt in this climactic scene, feels completely invalidated without much else to replace it with. On the other hand, Memento's emotional core of persevering through amnesia instead shifts from a lesson on perseverance and overcoming limitations to an equally resonant emotional core describing the lengths that we go to live a more comforting yet harmful lie. There's a similar reading of Inception's finale where we don't place some importance on whether or not Cobb ends in a dream, but instead focuses on his choice to walk away. Cobb finally discards his obsession with reality and chooses to leave the top spinning. This shift could be thematically resonant by arguing that even if the world around you is fake, the feelings you feel are real, and Cobb realizes his obsession with reality has strayed him away from that fact. But once again, the torture behind obsessing over ensuring you're in reality isn't an experience that the audience truly lived, because Inception doesn't consistently engage the audience in that obsession. You can imagine the immense catharsis the audience would feel when Cobb finally walks away, because they too have been torturing themselves with a similar obsession. But because Inception has failed to build up this game as integral to understanding the film, this potential reading still feels half-baked. It bothers me that Inception got so close to reaching the same heights as Memento, yet failed to engage the audience in the same way. Puzzle films have such a unique potential to challenge audiences to see the world through a new, disorienting perspective and to fix them alongside its fictional protagonist in the pursuit of overcoming its limitations. But they can only do so by consistently rearranging and omitting story information to mislead its audience. thereby more actively engaging them with its story. Memento teaches us how effectively a puzzle film can align audience and character perspective to motivate the game's engagement by tying it to the emotional core of the film, and by providing alternate readings with thematically resonant perspectives on the entire film. Inception's premise provides fertile ground for similarly incredible levels of engagement, but it ultimately fails by losing sight of its main premise, yet still attempting to assert its relevance. Memento uses the puzzle film format to make Leonard's story feel lived, while Inception fails to implement the puzzle film format to similarly heighten its audience's engagement. But that's what I think. What does Christopher Nolan think?
Do I have to get your film, or can I experience your film?
If you experience my film, you are getting it. And that, I feel very strongly about that. And I think that where people encounter frustrations with my narratives in the past, sometimes I think they're slightly missing the point. It's not a puzzle to be unpacked. It's an experience to be had.
Truthfully, he's a filmmaker that cares more about film's capacity to present unique perspectives to an audience, and simply allows that perspective to wash over them. In this capacity, Inception absolutely succeeds in presenting a thrilling, subversive take on the heist film that depicts reality-bending perspectives on the world. While maybe it fails as a puzzle film, that doesn't prevent this film from nonetheless being a cinematic joyride. I just hate to see how Inception misses out on a more intimate journey through a potentially wildly interesting, deceitful perspective. But who knows? Maybe I'm just seeing something I already want to believe. Thanks for watching.